Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, I was told about that spiritual indigestion with Universalist concerning that three-letter word. But the majority of people on earth do believe in a higher power, and most of them refer to it as that three-letter word. Now, there are some things that come to mind when that word is mentioned, and I can understand fully why some people would object to it because of the kind of traditional framework that it comes to us in. As I was sitting there, well, the first thing I wanted to say to you is thank you for introducing me, but the Baptist preacher comes up after the song. I was just sitting there thinking, and I thought about a number of things that made me laugh, and one is my phone, which where'd I put it? Right there. You notice it has all these pretty blue colors and that kind of thing in it. Well, I think all of us have a little yin and yang, a little male and female in all of us. And so when I went looking for this, and they looked at the colors, they said, "That's your phone?" I said, "Yeah, that's my phone." Because I like that. And when I go to Five Below sometimes to buy things and I look for phone chargers, I want to get the pink ones. I do. And when I write my notes in the notebook, I like the colorful notebooks. And so we're a kaleidoscope, and I enjoy the kaleidoscope. And I like pink shirts and all that kind of thing. I know we've assigned those colors and those things in our tradition and our conventions, but be what you are and like what you like. I like what I like, and I think there's a freedom that we deny ourselves when we don't freely express who we are. And so this morning I wanted to talk with you, and this is just an introductory piece. And by the way, Neil Donald Walsh, who is my teacher, was a member of, I was on a Zoom call with him last week, and he said he was not a protege of Elizabeth Cooper Ross. He was actually a member of her staff for a number of years. And so he's been around, and he's been writing for quite some time, and his life is intertwined with that of some pretty powerful people in terms of spirituality and understanding our existence and all those things that go along with that. So I feel really privileged to be one of his students and to have read his material and to continue to reread it and reread it. Some of you have read Conversations with God. And I would encourage you to go back and read it again, because like we tell the students when they say, "Well, I finished reading that," we say, "Read it again, because you'll find something in it this time that you might not have found in it before." And I've discovered that with much of his writing. So this morning, I want to introduce the thought to us, and it may not be a new or a foreign thought to most of us, that we are the stuff of which life is made. We are the primal essence expressed. We are, to use the more religiously leaning word, incarnations of that which is. That which is all things is in and through us and every subatomic particle in the universe. And modern science is coming along now and telling us that everything's connected, that there's no such thing as empty space, that we're all made of the same stuff, and inextricably so. Now, that does not mean that we're all the same. There's a difference between being the same and being one. Our bodies are one thing, but the different parts are a part of that one body. We can look out at the ocean and see billions of waves. And without the waves, there is no ocean. And without that full expression that we call the ocean, that makes up the waves, there is no entity we can call an ocean. So what I'm suggesting this morning is that each and every one of us is an individuated expression of that primal essence, whether we choose to call it nirvana or ultimate reality or God or primal essence or the cause of every effect. Each one of us is an expression of that. A tree is its many branches. There's one tree. Hundreds, thousands of branches that make up the tree. Why am I mentioning these things? I'm mentioning them because there are indicators and there are examples of this universal truth all around us. Everywhere we look, we see individuated expressions of things. What would exempt us from that? That we're individuations of something much larger. And it is a matter of measure, not separation, but individuation. All the parts make the whole, and they are all inextricably intertwined and interconnected. Our predecessors, many of them, when they looked out into the world and they experienced events that happened around them and above them, did not see the interconnectivity, but rather saw something that was other than them. And those first assumptions are what many of us have embraced even to this day. That somehow there is an other and then there is us. But this morning I'm suggesting that the other is us and that we are the other. They saw from their limited perspectives disconnection versus differentiation. You can be different and yet connected. And our theologies and cosmologies, based on those first assumptions, have impregnated us with ideas that I'm convinced do not serve us. They're ideas that suggest because we are unique and differentiated, we're also separate. A very present and very obvious example of differentiation and oneness, which is a dichotomy, is the fingers on our hand. They're not all the same, but they are all connected. So sometimes we think that when someone says we're one and we're inextricably tied together, they're also saying we're all the same. That is not true. We can look around the world and see that we're not all the same. We can look into this building this morning and see that we're not all the same. But that does not mean we're not interconnected with the primal essence that is in and through all of us. And because our cosmologies and theologies have sown within us the seeds of thinking of ourselves being separate rather than individuated, we have done all kinds of things under and within that context. When we look around and see the dysfunction, when we look around and see the conflict, when we look around and see the tragedies that happen in the world, the underlying thought is that somehow the other, and usually when we talk about things like what's right and wrong or what's evil and good, we're pointing the finger at those people. Those people, not me. They're the problem. And this is what I think Jesus was addressing. This was one of our spiritual masters. When he said, "Why beholdest thou the beam that is in your brother's eye when there's a log in yours?" He was trying to get us to understand, as we often say, you have met the adversary, and it is you. This morning I'm saying we've also met the saviors, and it is us. We have met God. We have met the Primal Essence, and it is us. It is in and through us. Our fundamentalist ideas embrace those first assumptions, and many of us refuse to let them go. We're not open to expansion and new paradigms concerning this. It is almost like children who've learned to add and subtract and think that somehow that's all there is to mathematics. But Shakespeare, again, I quote, was right. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophies. So this morning, I'm not suggesting that the first assumptions were wrong, as much as the first assumptions simply were not broad enough. They were not expansive enough. And growth cannot take place without us having a willingness to be open to expansion. As Jesus said again, and I often refer to him because he's the one we're most familiar with in the Western world, no man having drunk old wine straightway desireth new, because he thinks the old is better. And many of us cling to tenaciously the ideas that have been embedded in us, and it's to be expected. Because to abandon some of those fundamental beliefs is to knock the legs from under the chair, to attack the framework upon which we sit. But why not at least be willing to say, I don't want to give up what I believe, but I can be open to the fact that there might be more to this than I presently know and understand. Is it possible, just possible, that there's more to life and to the primal essence or to the cause of all things than we presently know, the understanding of which would change everything? Is it so far-fetched to believe that because we're sentient and we can experience ourselves, we can know ourselves in our own experience, that cosmic ocean is expressing itself in and through us, and that we've been equipped with all that we need to be all that we are? And maybe what we call hell is not some eternal place of torture where we're judged and punished, but wrongful thought. Hell is essentially us being less and believing less than who we truly are, to be separated from the essence of who we are. And why we are here is a hellish kind of condition. And when we look around us at our world, we see the violence, and we see the poverty, and we see the degradation, and we see the humiliation. We see the walls that are built between us along cultural lines and along ethnic lines and along gender lines. We are seeing the hellish expressions of our fundamental belief that somehow, because we're individuated, we're also separated. The story is told of an American soldier during World War II who took the life of a German soldier and then walked over and looked at this man's dead body, and his wallet had fallen out of his pants. And as he looked through that, he saw the man's family. He saw photos of their times together. And he said it suddenly dawned on him. He was just as human as I am. We were on different sides of the battle, but that did not make him less human. And perhaps when we begin to recognize that we're all expressions of one thing that is all things, a primal essence that's in and through us all, we'll get rid of this counterintuitive and counterproductive notion of superiority, because a thing cannot be superior to itself. These ideas of separation and the hubris that comes with the notion that I'm somehow better, I'm somehow more equipped or more valuable or more precious. Maybe if we begin to understand that we're interconnected, that we're tied together in a single garment of destiny, and that individuation does not mean separation, we can finally come to the point where we can say and honestly say it, as I said to my cousin the other day as she met with me at the hotel with her partner. She said, "What do you think of this?" I say, love and let love. Love and let love. Because our conventions and our prejudices and our bias toward one another along so many lines, I believe, is what has impeded the beautiful expression of life that comes in many colors and shades and in many expressions. We have impeded the beauty of life expressing itself freely because of our presumptions. At some point, we must be courageous enough to re-examine our fundamental ideologies and theologies and cosmologies and pathologies and consider there's more to be realized than we presently know. Our long-standing religions have indeed brought rich wisdom to us and great insights, yet much of the original authentic teachings have been lost, strayed, tampered with, and misinterpreted. Many rich spiritual insights, like those of the indigenous populations, have been either ignored or dismissed by Western hubris as inferior or savage and even worthless. They're great and grand insights we can get from one another. And I said when I first spoke here at the Universalist Church that the Universalist way is another way. It is not a better way. It is another way. Because how can you miss a target that's everywhere? Someone said there's one way. One way to what? The target is everywhere. The primal essence is everywhere. It is in and through everything. What pathway could we take that would not lead us home or would not lead us to that primal essence? It is everywhere. You can't miss it. Whether it be Hindu or Jew or Christian or Muslim or Taoist or Confucianist, whatever pathway you take that works for you, each soul walks its own path. But we must be respectful and civil enough to say, peace be upon you and blessings on you. And because we are all connected does not mean we're all the same. But we can get to the place where we can be civil with one another. And so those of us who get angry and say, well, if there is a primal essence, if there is a God, if there is this higher power, why won't it do something? And it seems that I can hear that primal essence saying to us, why won't you do something? Because you have the toolkit, the power, the ability, the capability to make of this world what you decide to make of it. And it is through our collective efforts that we make the world new and renew it. The world is in the condition it is today because of decisions we have made and have not made. 50,000 children die from hunger daily, and we bring 60,000 more into the world. So we cannot use the excuse, well, it can't be helped. It can be helped. Dr. King said in his last sermon at Riverside Church or at the Washington Cathedral, we have the resources and the techniques to get rid of poverty. It is a matter of whether we have the will. Humanity has the capability to take this shapeless mass and use these tools to create out of life what we desire it to be. We are God. We are looking for something that we already are. I use this parable. What does a tree have to learn? What does a tree have to learn? Nothing. The seed of what it is within it. And the seed of who we are is within us. And it is incumbent on us to recognize that there is no great puppet master in some secluded place called the heavens who is moving in and among us like the great puppet master, but we've been given the autonomy and the self-realization capability and the awareness to create whatever we decide to create. And so while we're calling for God or calling on the Primal Essence, it is saying to us, but you're calling on something you already are. You have the power. You have within you what is necessary to make the crooked straight, to exalt the valley, and to lower the mountain. So then it is time for us to take a new look at ourselves with the ever-widening chasms and horrific brutality, the isolation, the alienation, and failure to grasp the interconnected nature of both our physical and metaphysical existence. It is very much a matter of urgency. The human race has done grand things, even in our very elementary state in terms of evolution. We've done some wonderful things. We put a man on the moon. We built gargantuan architectural masterpieces. We built metropolises. We've developed languages. We crawled out of the sea. We crawled out of the sea and came onto land. And look at where we are now. We have the tools and the capability to do whatever it is we desire. There's a passage in the Bible that says, when this people is one, nothing they imagine to do shall be restrained from them. We impact one another. Our collective existence impacts our individual existence. And most of us have not graduated or matured to the level of spirituality to change collective outcomes through our individual energy. But there are masters who've come among us and have shown us how to do it. It is a matter of will. We should applaud those who work tirelessly to build bridges and bring multitudes together in a fellowship of brotherhood, ecumenical unison, and a more beloved community. There are people who are doing this that we should applaud and pray for and support. Yet much more work is to be done. Much more is to be done. We must come to see that because you are here and I am there, does not mean that somehow beyond here and there, we are interconnected in a way and in a way that we cannot change because the Primal Essence has made it so. There are things within the contextual existence in physicality that we can change, and we have opportunities to do that. There's a certain amount of freedom. I'm going to, as I said, this is introductory. There's much more to this, much more rich. It's much richer than this. But I will say this, to those of us who somehow feel that there is really a kind of rule of right and wrong that we can measure each other by and measure events by. Ethics is a moving feast. What is right and wrong? It is something we make up over time, from geographic location to the other. It's really not a matter of what we call right and wrong, because those paradigms shift, they change. And one would say, if there's no absolute right and wrong, how do we live? We live with two fundamental things in mind. That although there may not be some external rule of right and wrong, there are consequences and outcomes because we live in a universe that has universal laws. And the outcome of those universal laws in our lives are not judgments and punishments. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. I was learning to drive when I was 14. And the woman who was teaching me said, "Charles, you're erratic." And she said the reason for that is because you don't understand centrifugal force. She said there's something called centrifugal force, and when you drive, if you work with it, it works with you. Why did you use that example, McKenzie? Because there are natural laws in our universe that are there not to punish us, not to judge us, but to help guide us along the way. And the freedom we have to make choices and experience outcomes gives us the capability of deciding who and what we are. How would it make sense if the Primal Essence gave us commandments and orders and said this is right and that is wrong? There's no choice in that. Because we would think, okay, I must not do this because if I do this, then I may get punished, or there may be something that will happen in some afterlife. When essentially what it is human beings must recognize the course we take, the things we do, the outcomes and the consequences that come from that, and then decide, is this who we are? Is this who we are? Let me say this as I close. I want to interject this. I can't leave this out. Nelson Mandela liked this too much for me to leave it out. There's a poem called Invictus. And Nelson Mandela, for 27 years while in prison, would recite this over and over in his head. And I believe this applies to all of us. It applies to not just Nelson Mandela, but every person in this room as individuations of that primal essence that has given us endless capacity to be creative and know ourselves in our own experience. We are not robots or minions, but we are creative beings made in the likeness and image of that primal essence. And in order to experience who we are within a contextual field where we can make choices and experience those outcomes and then decide a grander and greater expression of who we are. It is not so much right and wrong as it is, who are we? Who are we authentically? Out of the night that covers us, black as the pitch from pole to pole, we thank whatever gods may be for our unconquerable souls. This is a paraphrase. In the fell clutch of circumstance, we have sometimes winced and cried aloud. Yet under the bludgeonings of chance, our heads are bloody but not forever bowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms sometimes but the horror of the shade. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find us unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scrolls. We are the masters of our fate. We are the captains of our soul. We already have God. We already have the primal essence. We already have nirvana. We already have heaven. We already have a new earth and everything that we could desire to make it. Because we are the purveyors. We are the prognosticators. And to use a phrase that some may not particularly like, but to prove my point, we are God.